please allow me to introduce myself. I am Tom Goldsby. I'm Professor of Supply Chain Management and the Haslam Chair of Logistics at the Haslam College of Business at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I also serve as the co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Business Logistics. I'm delighted to be joined today by Anton Du Preez. Anton is Sales Director for an array of advanced technologies at Korber Supply Chain, including voice, vision and mobility, autonomous mobile robots, and supply chain modeling and scheduling. Anton brings more than 25 years experience in business development and warehouse management and ERP arenas. Welcome, Anton. It's great to have you with us today.
Hey, Tom. Lovely to be with you again. Thank you.
Fantastic. Say, I also would like to ask if you can help to illuminate a little bit more with our audience about the Korber SAP relationship. We know that they have a long-standing affiliation. Can you provide us with just a brief background about Korber's status? And
sure, Tom. Yeah, be happy to. So we've been working with SAP in various forms for well over 20 years. Perhaps a useful milestone to highlight would be we did with SAP the very first EWM implementation close on 15 years ago, and have a large SAP practice that's grown with that. The other area specific to today's session is around voice. We're a certified SAP partner, so we have certified voice integration directly into NetWeaver as well as into S/4HANA. So always enjoy working with SAP, speaking to SAP customers and prospects. Hopefully today will give everyone some good insight as to how they can use SAP and voice together.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Anton. So I'm going to turn things back over to you in just a few minutes, but please allow me to cover a few items with our audience here. First of all, what is the purpose of this masterclass? The purpose is to tackle the challenges of today's increasingly complex supply chain, bringing you best practices and innovative thinking from academics like myself, as well as industry insiders and senior leaders like Anton. What are we trying to accomplish? We want to provide guidance and insights in managing your supply chain as a competitive advantage. This masterclass dedicated to SAP Supply Chain Excellence will explore the ways in which companies can most effectively and efficiently deploy the capabilities of SAP's suite of solutions. Today, we're going to take a deep dive at looking at voice solutions, and I would encourage you to take a look at the previous sessions that we've conducted in this masterclass. We are wrapping up this particular masterclass today, but you'll see that we have covered a wide array of SAP Supply Chain Excellence topics, and don't fret if you've missed any of those sessions. They are all available to you on demand. You're going to receive an invitation to access those sessions. And also, I point out that we've completed 4 other masterclass series, as indicated at the bottom of the slide. And you will have access to all of those masterclass sessions as well, addressing a wide array of contemporary topics in supply chain management and the application of advanced technologies. So with that understanding, let's go over some housekeeping items. All of your phone lines are muted out there, so don't worry if you've got any background noise in your workplace or home, wherever we're reaching you today. We can't hear a thing. However, we do want to hear from you in the form of questions. If you have a question at any time during today's session, please submit it via the GoToWebinar menu. I will be watching the questions window, and we'll direct any of those questions that we get to Anton. If we run out of time today, Anton will be happy to address those questions offline for you. Also, just another reminder that we have a brochure available to you today, and it is titled Voice of SAP, What Your IT Team Needs to Know. So that is today's complimentary handout that is found in the GoToWebinar menu. So with that, let's go ahead and proceed with today's topic. And I just wanted to frame the discussion today with some exploration of the pretty robust expectations for growth in the application of voice in the warehouse. And you see that the market is estimated to be about $1.5 billion US this year. and expected to grow about 14.7% cumulative annual growth rate over the next 5 years, to where it will virtually double by 2025. Should point out that there's a lot that's found here. This would be the hardware as well as implementation associated with this market. But RF is still the pervasive technology out there, but it is seemingly losing some of its hold on the market. If we take a look at the next slide, you'll see some of the reasons why voice is gaining so much steam. And this comes to us from a Korber Supply Chain blog entry from our very own Taylor Kennedy, who notes some very impressive statistics with regard to productivity gains, also noting that order picking is where voice-directed work finds most of its application, but that's also where 50 to 55% of warehouse operating costs are found. So if we can achieve efficiencies in picking that voice can afford, that is tremendous. So up to 35% productivity gains by virtue of bringing voice into the operation. But it's not just limited to productivity gains. You see also very impressive improvements in accuracy around order picking. You see training time reduction of up to 50%. Also, in a time when it's very hard to recruit and retain talent, seeing worker satisfaction and tech adaptability enhancements is worthwhile, that could ultimately result in reduced turnover among employees, estimated at 50%. So not only can your workers be more productive, but they can also perhaps enjoy the work more. And as you note there at the very bottom, safety enhancement and damage reduction, so that we conduct the work in a more safe and damage-free response. So these are just incredible statistics to me. And Anton, I know you've been working in voice for quite some time. And what we want to do today is try to look at how not only voice, but voice in association with SAP, EWM, perhaps MFS, can help to bring forward these impressive outcomes. So Anton, can you illuminate us today?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Would be delighted to. If we could jump to the next slide. Yeah, it's always nice for me, speaking about voice, those figures that Tom just highlighted are customer statements, customer references, and it's a very rewarding thing for me to be involved in an industry where you get those results that make customers happy, make users happy. It's just a really good place to be. So I'm sure I'm not telling anybody anything new here by saying that there's ongoing complexity and challenges and order fulfillment inside distribution centers. That's almost a statement we could make any time, any year. We're always faced in supply chain with the pressure to do better, to be more competitive, to be more cost effective. There's a great opportunity to get these gains from the activities on your shop floor by integrating with SAP. I think the key there is to get something that's seamless and efficient in how you do that. There are quite a number of ways that you can seek out these gains and get your technologies integrated with SAP. And hopefully what we can cover for you today is some considerations, some plans and direction on how to make the best decision to achieve those fantastic gains. You know, there are a range of options to look at. You could have paper labels that some people still use today. As Tom mentioned, the predominant technology will typically be some kind of handheld terminal, some mobile computer that gets carried around. Vision is appearing now and then in the market as well as a very new technology, and voice we'll go into in a little bit more detail now. So we could move on to the next slide, please. So probably good if we just level set at the beginning to define perhaps what we mean by voice and also by vision that I referred to there. So when we talk about voice, we're referring to a very structured dialogue that guides an associate through a very specific workflow. Could be picking, could be cycle counting, could be loading, anything like that in the distribution center. And voice is used to both direct the process and to capture data back from the associate. As you see in the picture in the bottom left there, the voice system directs the associate to pick 7, and she replies 7, confirming the quantity, as well as all the other directions and responses you might need. So it's a little different from what you might have with speaking to Siri or OK Google or Alexa, which are very broad systems that operate in the cloud and let us ask any form of question. This is a very narrow industrial application-specific voice, but it works exceptionally well in the environment of the distribution center and warehouse. Vision delivers similar types of benefits, but it's based on using a heads-up display that visually directs the associate through what they need to do. And it really is a mechanism of direction. As far as feeding back into the system, it's often combined with some form of data capture, such as a scanner to scan confirmation of location or product. So that's really hopefully gives you a sense of what we mean by voice and vision. We do have lots of other materials available if you want to dive a bit deeper into those. So if we could move on, please. Then I think if we go now into the specifics of voice with SAP WM or EWM, hopefully no surprise to anyone that in 2027 now, SAP is going to sunset WM, the previous versions of its warehouse management system. So we'd certainly recommend if you're on WM, you should be planning your migration to EWM. There's still time to get that done, but you could well be running on WM for a period of time still. So we'll talk both about integration with WM and EWM. You probably got a clue from the diagram on the right that there are a range of different ways. And there's no right way or wrong way to integrate voice into SAP. It really does depend on the systems that you have today, the processes you're looking to voice enable, and your IT strategy that you have. If we start from the bottom, what certainly is very key here is to have a proven, robust voice platform to support your voice solution. And we can advise you on that. We've been implementing voice. We use Honeywell's voice solution that we've deployed for many years. And from that, we build up as to the best way to integrate with SAP. If you're today using SAP WM, one of the things you'll probably have found is that relative to Tier 1 warehouse management systems on the market, relative to EWM, it has fairly limited execution capability. And by that, I mean the ability to orchestrate work, sequence work, direct processes. It'll operate typically with transfer orders and just send them off to the warehouse for them to get acted on. So the way that we typically integrate with WM is we either put in what we call a voice execution system, which covers that gap. So the execution system does that complex orchestration. Let me give you examples. Taking a single transfer order and splitting it amongst multiple associates. If it's a large quantity or in different zones, you might want to get multiple people picking and consolidating the order at the end. That's typically much easier in an execution system than trying to configure in SAP WM. We do very complex things, volumetric pallet building, for example, we do for some customers, or we can just do simple good picking processes. In that case, we're usually interfacing back to SAP with a remote function call, a BAPI. IDOCs are the sort of the common, very old way, but work robust. Some customers even just use a file integration to work with that. So that allows us to go in and re-engineer the processes and bring this additional execution capability. We do have some customers that don't seek to have that sort of external system in addition to WM. And there we do a direct integration with remote function calls or BAPIs directly to the voice platform. And here the voice dialogue is typically controlled within SAP WM itself, but that requires a little bit of development in ABAP and some SAP resources. For both SAP WM and SAP EWM, you potentially are using a component called SAP's Internet Transaction Server, ITS. That's the component in SAP that generates HTML or web pages that are used down on traditional screen-based mobile devices in the warehouse. We also have technologies that allow us to take those screens as they're produced by ITS and voice enable them. So if you could imagine you're overlaying voice on top of your existing screen processes. This can give you a quick win. It does in some ways slightly limit your ability to re-engineer your processes because you're constrained by how the screens operate today. But we do have a number of customers with that approach. They're able to get those hands-free, eyes-free benefits pretty rapidly. So in the WM world, I think you're typically seeking to get more execution capability than might be available, and that's either built inside SAP or in an external execution system. When we look at EWM, EWM has a much more comprehensive execution capability, a completely different architecture internally as to how it manages work streams. It can break transfer orders and larger movements down into tasks and activities and sequence those. So generally, if you're running EWM, there's no need to consider an external execution system. What we're really looking at in that scenario is how best to voice enable what you already have as logic inside EWM. Two typical ways we do that. The one is you can drive the voice platform, the voice dialogue for your associates directly from within EWM. So again, here you're going into your ABAP. We have a designated namespace. We have specific tables. And inside that, you can craft the dialogue, or we can craft that for you. But everything is developed directly inside SAP. Or with EWM, the other option as well is to use the ITS mobile screens that you might have or that come as standard with SAP and add a voice capability on top of them. So that's really the sort of the set of ways we can integrate. I would emphasize again, there is no right or wrong in any of these. It really does depend on those factors. So what we thought we'd do on the next two slides, if we could step onto the next one, is to give you some prompts, some of the considerations that you should be making to try and arrive at which of those is the best for you. I think very importantly is we always recommend start with the business case. There's really no point in getting too excited about the IT and the options you have with technology if there's no business case to drive the project overall. So at its very simplest form, voice can bring you hands-free, eyes-free benefits. So as a rough estimate, you'd be looking at probably a 10% productivity gain by freeing up associates. They're not carrying and picking up and putting down scanner guns. They've got their eyes in front of them. They're getting guided very simply through a process. So we usually see gains in the region of approximately 10% for that. But you also have this opportunity to re-engineer your processes, to think, because of what voice enables, how can you get more out of a process? And in that case, you might, again, design that process inside SAP or use an external execution system. But that does let you rethink a little bit about how operations occur in your warehouse and see if you can squeeze more benefits as part of the project. Typically, as I said, in WM, that's where there's the greatest opportunity for enhancement, and it's definitely worth considering that as part of the business case. If your processes are already set up and running through SAP ITS Mobile, then that's definitely worth considering to voice enable those screens that you have. To say the slight downside is you might not get quite as much re-engineering, or you'd have to create a project to work with screens in a different way to get the re-engineered process. But it can be a great way to get up and running with voice really quickly. Then we do have mechanisms, and there's often a concept with any of these solutions and any back-end system of having real-time data. I tend to prefer the phrase business time rather than real time. It means you have the data in the system when you need it. If you need to make a decision about, how do I redeploy labor or when is the truck going to depart, as long as you have the data by the time you need to make that decision, whether it got there in a millisecond or a second or a minute or 5 minutes, doesn't matter. You had it when you need it. So in some cases, there is a need for very much a real-time integration with SAP, in which case that will inform certain integration options. Those kind of external execution system I mentioned typically will operate that you transfer either in a batch or as and when it gets released by SAP, you transfer the transfer orders over to the external system. And as soon as the work is completed, order line by order line or transfer order by transfer order, it's passed back up to SAP, which in most cases is certainly in business time. I would consider, think about that as to what might be relevant. You might have dependencies further up in your SAP system that drive that decision. If we could move to the next slide, please. Then one of the other considerations, which I think is always important with SAP customers, is we know it's a very large, complex system. It has a lot of resources that are required to maintain it and enhance it for the business. And one of the considerations is, do you have IT resources available? If you do, you can consider options of embedding voice inside your own SAP and having full control of it yourself from within your ABAP. Alternatively, if IT resources are limited or prioritized on other projects, you might want to look at more of an externalization or using a company like ourselves to take care of that portion for you and give you the outcome without as much involvement from your own IT resources. So assessing that and having a view on that when you go into to consider this is another area worth thinking through. We certainly see with some customers that there's a strong desire to have full control of the voice process from within ABAP. So real deep integration, the ability, for example, to manage localization. We have a couple of multinational customers that will want it, speaking Brazilian Portuguese in Brazil, speaking Spanish in parts of the US, speaking English in the same site, for example, all through SAP's existing structures for localization. So we have processes like that. But if that's, again, not really a big driver for you, if it's more just get voice working with SAP, then having somebody else take care of that or externalizing it are perfectly valid as well. Wi-Fi connectivity is worth being aware of. All of these solutions do operate through Wi-Fi connectivity. And typically when you're doing that direct real-time connection with SAP, you have a greater dependency on the wireless infrastructure that you have. Now, to be fair, wireless has improved significantly in the last 10 years. That's becoming less of an issue. But if there are concerns, or for example, if you need to perform some of the process in an area that does not have wireless coverage, then that can also impact which integration approach you take. We have a customer in Houston that uses voice with SAP to inspect transformers out in a yard. There is no Wi-Fi coverage out in the yard, so we're able to download that information, let the associate go off, perform their inspections offline from SAP. When they come back into the hotspot, all of the data is uploaded. So that's a different kind of interface which can address that kind of problem. Then the final area to look at is you get a wealth of information that's available from a voice system. Some of it really granular. Every process, every step of the process that the associate takes. And with some of the newer voice devices, there are far more sensors that can even do measuring the steps that an associate takes, proximity measurement in the case of dealing with some of the social distancing necessary now in our new world with COVID. So you're having all this data being fed up through the system. And it's a question of, do you want to retain that in SAP, or do you want to have that in some external system that's more geared for that type of data capture and reporting? So again, another consideration when looking at how you might choose your integration options. So that's a whole lot of considerations. Hopefully that gives you a sense. I could certainly say, if you want to jump to the next slide, that the benefits are there to be had. We really do see this consistently across the customer base. So I'd strongly recommend exploring voice with your SAP system as a really great opportunity to drive benefits and make your associates safer and more comfortable. So with that, I don't know, Tom, if we have any questions we might have from the audience.
We do. Thank you, Anton. Appreciate those insights. And yes, we are now going to take questions. Already have received a few and can direct these to you. So yeah, I really liked what you had to offer in the way of the different pathways to bring voice into the operation. And you said that there's no right way, no wrong way necessarily. With regard to determining how to get there, what path to take, the question reads, what guidance can you provide in terms of implementation time associated with migrating your workforce to voice? What does a project look like?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that it's fair to say that a voice implementation project is not dissimilar to most IT projects where you're going to be bringing about a change for your users. Certainly at the beginning, we do want to make sure that we know what we're shooting for. So we look at some form of definition. What is the process like today? What are the changes we're planning to make? What benefits are those processes going to deliver? And we have a lot of mechanisms of determining that so that we know there's a business case to shoot for and we know what it is that we want to do. Once that's established, that also typically will involve determining which of these integration approaches is the most appropriate for that. That solution gets built in whichever ways is right for the integration approach. But I think probably the piece I would highlight the most in this is I'd really strongly recommend never underestimate and never underinvest in the training and go live support of your associates on the shop floor. Voice is a great technology, users do love it, but it is a change that you're bringing about, and there'll be nervousness and very common questions that we see from our users. So having an experienced team that can win the hearts and minds, make it really easy to understand, deal with those initial queries and concerns, and get it off to a strong start is, to me, one of the secrets of success to achieving the business case. If you neglect that, you can have a beautiful IT technology and not have that backing and drive in the deployment. So that would probably be my recommendation on that one.
That's great advice. Might as well involve the people who will be using the technology from the outset of the project. That's great input. Hey, we do want to take the opportunity here. We're going to afford a few more minutes for questions with Anton, but I want to make you aware of the next masterclass series that we're going to be kicking off on Thursday on the subject of disaster mitigation. We're going to be featuring Zubair Amla, who's the Senior Sales Manager with Korber Supply Chain, to get that session, that new masterclass series underway. At the same time, high noon U.S. Eastern Time. And again, excited about getting a new one underway. Also, just take this moment to remind you that we also have a handout associated with today's session. Please be sure to access that one. It is titled Voice and SAP, What Your IT Team Needs to Know. So getting back to questions, Anton, this question goes back to something that I referenced at the outset of the session, talking about how we tend to associate voice with the picking area of the warehouse and picking operations. The question is, where else or how else might we apply voice technologies?
Oh, lovely one. Thank you, whoever asked that one. So let me take you back 23 years now, when the team that I'm part of first did their voice implementations. At that point, 23 years ago, we implemented wall-to-wall voice, from receiving all the way through to loading, every single process done on voice. So the point of that story is that there is no process you couldn't use voice for. As a user interface to direct somebody through a process and capture what they're doing, it applies to everywhere. The real big factor as to should you do it, you can do it, but should you do it, is that business case. So yeah, if I could put two extremes, if you're doing full pallet movements with a forklift, there's really limited hands and eyes involvement in that. Obviously, you're looking where you're driving and you're using your hands to steer, but other than that, if I made you hands-free, eyes-free, I might make you a little safer, I might make you marginally more productive, but I'm not moving the needle. If you're in a process where you're handling cases or eaches for an e-commerce pick, and the associate is now having to pick and grab things and place them and locate them, your hands are being used a lot. And if you're moving at a far higher pick rate or activity rate, could be for other processes as well, where not stopping and looking at a screen buys you an extra few seconds, that's really where the business case stacks up really well for voice. So can be used for everything. Yeah, and you get some really interesting peripheral benefits when you look at other areas. We had one customer that we deployed voice in that used it for their loading process. They already had it operational for picking. Part of their business case, which proved to be true, is they saved a lot on lost devices. With the handheld mobile terminals they were using before, the associate was pushing roll cages into a vehicle, and typically they needed their hands to push. So they put the gun on top of the cage and pushed it inside the truck. And a whole bunch of devices used to end up at the store because they closed the truck after they'd pushed the roll cage in and moved on. It was end of shift. So not having that and having their hands free to do the manual work that they needed to had this peripheral benefit of far fewer lost devices. So that really is the point. Can you use it anywhere? Just assess the business case if it makes sense for you.
All comes back to the business case. Well, Anton, thank you so much for helping to illuminate the business case for us as it relates to voice. And it sounds like there is just tremendous potential out there. So we really appreciate you helping us to get a sense for how those benefits can be brought forward. I'd like to close by thanking all of the attendees as well for being out there, as well as the fine folks at Korber Supply Chain for hosting this session and the masterclass series dedicated to SAP Supply Chain Excellence. And simply close out here. Tom Goldsby signing off, but have a great day. Be safe, stay well.